Hey creative friends, welcome to my channel and welcome to another Mrs. Wages Week 2023 video. I'm super excited about this week because some of my friends and I who love to can Mrs. Wages things, their mixes are awesome. We're doing a collaboration for this whole week, just randomly putting videos up. Down in the description will be a link to all the channels that are participating because we all love Mrs. Wages. We've all probably already done videos on Mrs. Wages, but I thought it was a great idea to consolidate, make a whole Mrs. Wages week. So be sure and go over to all the channels. There will be a playlist, but be sure to go check all the channels. Hit the little bell icon so that you get notified when they're going to post a video, because there's no specific schedule. This is just a Mrs. Wages free-for-all. Everybody's just doing videos and they're putting them up. So you'll want to know when those are published because you want to watch them and you want to make a comment. Because at the end of this week, Mrs. Wages, I called them and told them we were doing this collaboration, and they were so cool. They sent me a whole bunch of packets of Mrs. Wages, and I'm going to make like a prize basket. So at the end, I'm going to do a random comment picker, one comment from one of the videos in the entire week, and you're going to win a bunch of Mrs. Wages. Super cool. So in this video, what I'm doing is I am going to do the dilled green beans. I love dilly beans. That's what we call them, is dilly beans. But they're so good. And with this recipe, you could either make it as a refrigerator mix or a canning mix. And I'm going to can it because this little packet will make 6 pints. I love this. Oh my gosh, it's so good. But I'll tell you what I need here is 2.5 pounds of fresh whole green beans, and that's what I have right here. 2.5 cups of distilled vinegar, and you know Mrs. Wages has a bunch of their own products. One thing that they have their own vinegar, they have their own salt, they also have citric acid, and then fresh fruit preserver, even things like alum. So there's a lot of products that Mrs. Wages has. There will be a link also to their website, so you'll want to check that out. Anyway, so 2.5 cups of Mrs. Wages white distilled vinegar. I've got it right here. 2.5 cups of water. When these are done, I'll use these for that. And then 1 cup of sugar and a pouch of the dilled green beans. Now, what I have to do is prepare and process the canning jars. This actually means people like to sterilize their jars all the time, but if you're going to process something in a boil water canner for more than 10 minutes, you actually don't need to sterilize them because they sterilize within that 10 minutes because that's how long you boil them to sterilize them. So it just happens. So it's kind of a twofer. That's kind of cool. But anyway, this one says wash the green beans, and then we're going to trim the tips. We're going to put the green beans in a non-reactive saucepan. I've got that over here. Do not use aluminum because there's going to be vinegar involved. And then we're going to cover the green beans with water and bring them to a boil and let them simmer for 5 minutes. Super simple. Then we're going to drain them. And then all we do is combine the vinegar, the sugar, the dilled mix powder out of the little envelope Mrs. Wages. And we're going to put all those in the pan with the beans. And we're going to let those go. We're going to bring them to a boil and let those reduce for simmer for 5 minutes. Then we're going to put them in the jars. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tip these off. I'm going to take the top and bottom, I'm going to take those off there. And then put these in the pan, cover it with water, and bring them to a boil and let them simmer 5 minutes. Now, mine are pint jars. The beans are going to be too big. I have a friend who measures every one of them and cuts them. I don't do that. We're just going to put them in there, and I'm going to cut them off and these little tips will go in their own jar. So you'll have a jar of dilled green bean ends. So that's what will happen there. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the ends off of all of these beans. One thing I also like to do is to pull them if they've got the string. If they're the kind that has the string, you want to pull the string out. And then we're going to put them in that pan. I'm going to boil this. I'll bring it to a boil. I'll let it simmer 5 minutes, and then I'm coming back to you. Okay, I've got the beans all boiled. They came to a boil, and then we simmered them for 5 minutes, just like the instructions say. And it says, now we're going to combine the drained green beans, because I drained them, and 2.5 cups of the Mrs. Wages vinegar, and then 2.5 cups of water. So let me go get that. Okay, there's the 2.5 cups of water. Then, it says on the back, combine the vinegar, the water, the sugar, and the pouch of goodness here. Ooh, see? And the thing is, all the seasonings and stuff are in there, and a lot of them are dehydrated other things, so it just is good. They're so good. Okay, so I'm going to mix. I just feel like I want to mix this up real well before I put the beans in. So I'm going to mix this, and then we're going to bring it to a boil, reduce the heat, and simmer for 5 minutes. While I'm doing that, I'm going to get everything set up to can it, because I'm going to put these in the jars and put them in the canner, and these will process for 20 minutes. Okay, so there. Now I'm going to put all the beans in. There we go. There we are. Get that down there so you can see. There's the beans with the Mrs. Wages. And I think you could see a little bit, just so good. Let me scoop a little of this out of here so that you can see. See all the spices and things that are in there? And it smells phenomenal. Okay, so now I'm going to put this on and let it come to a boil, and then I'm going to let it simmer for 5 minutes, and I'll be back. Okay, so I let those come to a boil, and then I turn them down and let them simmer. Now, I want at least some of the jars to have the straight, just the long green bean in them. Other jars I may just do chunks, but what I'm going to do in order to do that is I'm going to take out a nice long green bean, and I'm going to put it in there, and I need to measure to a 1/2 inch. And this is a little extra work, but I'm doing it because this is the way I like them. So a 1/2 inch is right there. So that's just coming basically to the bottom of the rim of the jar. Okay, so I'm going to show you that. See there? So I've got that in there at the 1/2 inch mark, and it comes right to the bottom of the rim. So now I know how long these beans need to be. So I'm going to take one of the beans, and I'm going to measure it in there. So then I've got this plastic knife, and I'm going to cut this bean off. And this is going to be my bean guide. So if I put that in there, yep, that's just right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bunch of beans out, and I'm going to cut them to that length, and then I'm going to put them in this jar. The little pieces will have their very own jar that I'm going to put those in. So let me get another jar so that I can put the little piece in, and then I'll cut a whole bunch of these beans, and then I'll come back. Okay, I've got these done. Now it would say that it makes 6 pints, and sometimes there's a little given, you know, little leeway there. But I want to show you the reason I feel like there's not 6 pints here. I did a whole jar of just the straight beans. See there? And the reason I did that is I used to have, there was a lady I worked with named Dee Dee, and she was famous for her dilly beans and her peach pie. And if you didn't do your dilly beans like this, she just thought you were not putting the effort in that you needed to. So I made one of these in honor of Dee Dee. But that takes a lot more beans, because when you have them just loosely packed, like this one is smaller, shorter bits that are cut up. This one is the longer beans, but they're just packed in there. So there's a lot more room around them. It doesn't take as much, I mean, it takes more space. So I've got 4 jars, which is fine. And there is another jar. But this one is in honor of Dee Dee. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my funnel, and we're going to take the brine that these boiled or simmered in and put it in the jars. Now, if for some reason there's not enough to go over the top, and pop that in there, then you can use a mixture of half water with half vinegar, like a 50-50, to bring them to the top. But let me go get my funnel. I'll be right back. Okay. Now, I'm going to mix this up because it has all the little spices in there. So I want to make sure, I want to show you. See all those spices in there? I don't know if you can see, but all the spices, little bits of onion and things like that. So I want to make sure that I stir this around before I get my ladle full to go in these jars. And then of course we're going to remove the air. I think there's going to be plenty here because I technically should have more jars. But you know what? Sometimes it's not exactly right, because it can be a difference in the produce, the size of the produce, the size of whatever you're doing, the way you've cut things. So either way, this is great. And you know what I'm going to do with this extra brine if I have any? I'm going to put it in my refrigerator and use it for pickled eggs, because I love that. Get some of this one that's got the seasoning in it. love that. Actually might pour a little off of this one because I don't think it got all the seasoning that I would want. So there you go. Now I'm going to mix this up and get a good, oh, there you go. That's going to make it even better. I want all those little bits in there. This one a little bit more. And now I'm going to remove the airspace, and I'll betcha I'll get to add a little bit more of this brine once I do that. So this one I'm going to kind of wiggle it around, get all the air bubbles out. You can see the air bubbles coming up, and you can see the liquid level go down. But this smells good. I'm excited about this. I have always loved dilly beans. And what I do sometimes with the little bits, like the little ones that are cut short, I will, like this one. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Like with one of these little ones like that, I'll put them on the top of, say, deviled eggs. I'll put a little dilly bean on the top of the deviled eggs. People like that. It's really good. So, get this down to 1/2 of an inch headspace. There we go. I might get to take a little bit of this brine out because it might be a little bit over that headspace. There we go. That's perfect. I love the peppercorns in there. And now I think they all look amazing. Okay, now that one could use a little bit more brine. And this one. And that one, a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to wipe the jar rims. Make sure there's no little bits of anything on those jar rims. Then these are going to process, let me double check. These will, you can put these straight in the refrigerator, leave them for 24 hours, and then they'll be yummy, and you should use them. They're good for 6 months, but once they're opened, you should use them in a week if you're going to use them as refrigerator pickles or beans. But here it says shelf stable, process the pints for 20 minutes, quarts for 30 minutes in a boiling water bath canner, and then we will do it that way. So I'm going to put the lid on, and then we're going to process these for 20 minutes. I am excited to have these on my shelf. And I'm excited to have all these great Mrs. Wages recipes. Alright, fingertip tight on the jars. Now, see how nice that looks? Super yummy. I'll show you the one I made for Dee Dee. She'd be so proud if she knew I spent all the time standing the beans up. Alright, so I'm going to go process those for 20 minutes, and I'll be back when they're done. Alrighty, friends, I have got them out of the canner, and they look so good. Look at those pretty dilly beans. Alright, these are the amazing dilled green beans from Mrs. Wages, and they turned out marvelous. So be sure and go check out everybody's videos for the Mrs. Wages collaboration this week, and be sure you comment because we want to be in for that awesome giveaway of a bunch of Mrs. Wages packets. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.